some of y'all have not lived through the Miley Cyrus Sally D era, and it shows. So a lot of people have been asking me to make a video on Salvia. So from a drug scientist perspective, I love talking about this drug because it is genuinely weird in so many different ways. So let me just explain to you kind of the fast facts of Sally D. So this drug used to be pretty popular. Back in 2009, it actually was used by about 1 in every 20 high schoolers. And now it's about 1 in every 100. So people seemingly have stopped using it. But I've heard that there's a resurgence, but the data does not necessarily show that. So if you've heard of anything, let me know. Now, this drug is a very potent hallucinogen, but like a very weird one. So the main psychoactive ingredient, the thing that's in the plant that's causing people to hallucinate, appears to be salvinorin A. But it's weird in that it doesn't work in the same way that pretty much every other drug that causes hallucinations does. So some of the main ones, so things like acid and mushrooms, those work by pretty much increasing serotonin. And that's why they're being tested on things like depression, because they kind of have those antidepressant-like effects too, because of that serotonin effect. And then we have other drugs like the dissociatives, so things like KET and things like PCP. Those do not work on the same receptors either. Those work on the NMDA receptors, which are a type of glutamate receptors. But this drug is actually working on the kappa opioid receptors. So they're not the same receptors that like H and Phen work on. Those are the mu opioid receptors. Salvia is working on the kappa ones. And how this causes effects, we have absolutely no idea. Like, it's not even like the other drugs that work on the same system. Those are used to treat itching. So why does this one cause hallucinations? And it also produces a very, very, very short effect, which is kind of strange for other hallucinogens too, other than DMT. But its effect typically kind of like peaks in around 2 minutes and is for sure gone by like 15 to 20 minutes. Now, people who've done this say that like that short effect actually feels like it lasts for a very long time, but in fact it is only at maximum like 20 minutes. So people will actually kind of chew this, or they typically smoke it. That is what Miley did when she got into trouble. So there was a video going around on TMZ, which I don't know if that's still a thing. There was a video going around basically showing her smoking it, and she supposedly lost like her Walmart deal over it. Like, it was a full thing. But at that time, it was pretty common. A lot of people were using it. Now, here's the thing. It has very, very strong effects. So when people use it, it's relatively short, but those effects are things like hallucinations. You feel kind of dissociated from the world. You don't feel like you are actually part of reality. Sometimes people say that they feel like this pressure on the body and they're just very disoriented. So if they get up, they don't know where they are in space and time. And in studies, people will say that this drug is very likely to produce like a 10 out of 10 effect. But we'll get to that later. Now, its primary effects are very like cerebral, so they're very psychological effects versus the physical. You don't actually typically see an increase in things like heart rate or blood pressure. It is just pretty much people having a strange psychological time. And it's also because of this not linked to overdoses. So since it's not necessarily changing a lot in your body, it's very unlikely that someone will overdose on this. But it is a plant, so it's a type of sage. So people might not overdose on that specific type, but there are related plants that look very similar that cause things like liver toxicity. So it's kind of the same problem that people have with like mushrooms. Like, one of the mushrooms makes them larger, one of them makes them small, one of them kills them. And it has a very weird legal status. So it is not actually controlled by the DEA. It's not on the United States Controlled Substance List, but some states have outlawed it, but it's about half and half. So what is the science on this? What do we know in terms of, is it dangerous? Is it addictive? What does it actually do? Turns out we basically know nothing. So we think that it could actually help with things like pain relief, and it might actually help stop using other drugs as well. But most of that research is done in animals, specifically rodents and monkeys. And like, it might not be good for kind of long-term conditions because a lot of people suggest microdosing for things like that. So using a smaller amount that doesn't really produce any sort of huge effect. But that would be really difficult to do with this drug because its effects are so short and so powerful. And so they tried to actually run a clinical trial on this to see if it might have some long-term potential. And basically they only got 13 people and it went basically nowhere. Now, another study was actually able to look at Salvia's effects in humans. Now, the way they did this was a lot. So they had a total of four participants. And these participants came in for a total of 20 sessions over about 6 to 14 weeks. And each session was 2.5 hours, and then they gave them either placebo, so nothing, or they had them smoke to actually get some of this drug. And the way they made them smoke was also very weird. So they just literally had like a hose coming out of the wall, and then the scientists would like very specifically light this pipe, and then the people would smoke it through a hose in the wall. They would inhale for 40 seconds, and then they were commanded to exhale. And then they just chilled for another over an hour, and then had a questionnaire, and they did this multiple times a week. And they got a full $50 each time they did this. So what did they find? First, people went literally unresponsive at the peak of this drug. Like half the participants just stopped doing anything. And they basically said, yeah, it does have a 10 out of 10 effect. This is extremely powerful. It also did not seem to change their heart rate or blood pressure, and they did not report that they disliked it. And that had been a common thing that we'd seen in the past, that people took this drug and they're like, nope, don't like that. Now, the main problem with this study is that in order to participate in it, you had to have used this drug before. So that's taking out anybody who might have used this drug, had a bad experience, and they're like, nope, not doing that again, because they wouldn't volunteer, or just anybody who's never taken it before. Which I understand why they did that. Like, giving this incredibly powerful hallucinogen to somebody who's never used it before is a weird thing to do for science. The ethical side of that is a little weird. But still, you're saying that these people did not have negative effects of the drug. Yeah, they've previously had positive effects. So you're just using that group who's more likely to have positive effects. And that for sure skews the results of the drug. Now, to be fair, I don't know how you get away from this problem. Like, you either then are trying to convince people who've had a bad effect to take it again, or give it to people who've never had it. And again, that's a little bit weird too. So yeah, we know pretty much nothing, but it's not necessarily the researcher's fault in this case. It's the weird world of drug science.